Mount Everest, 8,000 people have climbed it until now. 800 people just climbed it last May. So it means that at this rate, by 2020, 2021, we're going to reach 10,000 people to summit, the highest summit on Earth. And to me, as an adventurer and explorer, I find it very boring to go to a mountain like this, like everyone doing the same. You don't learn anything. I mean, you learn it for yourself, but there's nothing much to share about Mount Everest because everything is known. And that's why a lot of adventurers nowadays are going towards deserts. So this is a map of Australia, and exactly actually 10 years ago, I wanted to make an attempt to do actually what you see on the screen, the black line, which is a crossing north to south of the Simpson Desert. The Simpson Desert is the driest desert of Australia. No one had crossed it on foot, so without a car, just on your own for days or weeks. I mean, no one knew how long it would take. And actually I did it, but I did it a little bit shorter. I did actually the black line, but actually my route changed a little bit towards the gray line, as you can see. The yellow line is a line done by an Australian adventurer called John Muir. And before going to the desert, the Simpson Desert, actually you can see he did not cross the Simpson Desert, he crossed the entire of Australia completely on his own. It took him 4 months with his supplies, and he had actually to gather food and find water. I had all my water and all my food, which is different. And I read this a few months or a few weeks before leaving 10 years ago. So those pole walks are quite similar to the desert walks. He was speaking about going to the North Pole, South Pole, but pole walks are easier. They're good training for this walk. As for Everest, that's child's play compared to it. And coming from Mouscron, well, you know, it's like Everest, I know where it is. I can kind of imagine it's high, it's cold, and so on. Polar places, North Pole, South Pole, it's hard to imagine. And when someone says something like this, like Everest is kind of easy, and going across the desert is harder, and I'm actually going on the desert walk where he did not cross the desert because it was actually hard or too hard. Australians did not believe it. But anyway, 16th of July 2008, I made my own cart with actually, I made it myself with my dad with his kitchen designing software, and we found a mechanic to make it out of aluminium because, well, I don't have all the good skills to make it properly. And off I went for 5 weeks alone. That was a road on the start, then I entered the dunes. And I had a problem with the cart. It was 215 kilograms at the start, it's very heavy, and I wanted more freedom. So in 2015, I came up with a project which was crossing 3 deserts just with a backpack. And as an engineer, my question was very simple. And we heard Catherine say, how, who, comment, how to cross the desert with just a backpack, or how far can I go? What is the furthest distance I can go just with a backpack where I have total freedom? So I chose the first desert, Death Valley in California, and I did the world's first crossing north-south. So how do you cross that desert? It took me 8 days. First, obviously, I need a lot of food, but not that much. The most important is the water. So in my food, I had, like you can see, chocolate, bars, salt, some nuts and so on, mainly energy and proteins. And it starts like this. You start in a canyon, you go down a canyon until you reach the floor of a riverbed that you walk for about 100 kilometers. It's completely dry. And then you reach the, oh no, that's the second first. What happened at the time on this riverbed, because it was so hot, it's Death Valley. I mean, who has been to Death Valley here? Yeah, a few of you. And I had this black curtain in front of my eye. I was actually overheating, and I had to rest for a few hours. It was way too hot. I'm going to explain you why it was too hot. But anyway, after another day, I reached the sand dunes. Probably some of you have visited them. And I was so happy that I could actually get on top of the dune with the sunrise, and very happy to see because it was absolutely beautiful. And I go actually mainly on expeditions for seeing beautiful landscapes. And on one of the other dunes, I found this stone. I did not set up these rocks, as you can see, there are actually 3 different colors. It's called a metate, which is basically grinding stones for Indian people. Is it there for 100 years, 200 years, 300 years? We don't know yet. Obviously, there's a big chance that some Indians do go back to have this ritual and continue doing what their ancestors do. And I was very happy to see this, because this is part of the exploration. If you go where no one goes, you might end up actually to find something you don't even search for. Other difficulties in that valley are the wind and the salt. The salt gets into your nose, it's very hard to breathe and to speak, but when you have the wind, it can get really nasty, especially during the night. At one night, I could not pitch my tent in the ground because the ground was very, very hard. So when the wind came there, it was almost getting my tent on the side with me inside, so it was not comfortable at all. And I was very scared that it would actually tear off. So what I did is I removed the upper fly and I slept like this, which was actually better. Obviously, I was lucky. It was not raining on top of that, otherwise it would be a bit more difficult. And then after a few days, I got on the Badwater place, which is this kind of highway. You can really go fast. My backpack was lighter, and I made it. And one of the hardest terrain I actually ever walked on, as hard as this kind of stuff. It looks a little bit like cereals that you mix like granola or something, but it's actually mud and salt, and it's very, very painful when you walk on it. And it's very, very slow. And when you have like 500 meters of this kind of terrain, it's actually, I backtracked and I took a longer track around this. And a few hours later on the same day, it was a kind of same terrain, different. This was higher, deeper, less painful, but it was cracking and was going through. And you can break your legs, so not easy. But as you can see, it was perhaps 300-400 meters, so perhaps 20 minutes, half an hour, zigzagging. I mainly use on my expeditions the moon. I call it my mistress because I can kind of decide when she's coming to be with me. So I plan the dates to have the moon. And the moonlight in the desert, you see absolutely everything for 300 meters around, which means you can walk from 2-3 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. And it's just great, especially when it's hot during the day. For the second desert, I went back to the Simpson Desert. My idea was to do the red and the black line. I only did the red line, but I crossed. Actually, what I did is I reached a point I wanted to reach 10 years ago. That expedition was 2 years ago. And the mistake that I did in that valley was to add too much salt in my water. So I continued in the desert to add salt in my water, but I had almost 3 times the let-out dose in that valley. But because I was moving all the time, my body could actually, and because I never use salt normally in Belgium, not even on my fries, my body could go to a certain point that I got saturated and I did not die. But the thing is that when you have too much salt, which is great because you keep the moisture in you with the salt, but then you have a bit of a problem. If you keep the moisture in you, you don't evaporate the moisture, and evaporation, perspiration is losing this vapor, which means when you lose vapor, you lose heat, and that's why I was overheating inside. And that's how I had this black curtain, and potentially, if it was worse, a heart attack or something. But anyway, now I managed better myself. And so to go to the Simpson Desert, that was the weight of my bag from Sydney to Alice Springs, 18.4 kilograms without the water. I added 40 liters of water, some chocolate and some figs, and I reached 61 kilograms, which starts to be heavy. And this is all the equipment I had, obviously a lot of water, satellite phone, camera, sleeping bag tent, camping equipment. For all the 3 deserts that I did, my idea was, like I said, to maximize the distance possible walking. So the idea is that, like a car, with the gasoline, I have to carry the most water possible. So the idea was like a cooking stove to eat warm in the morning, or at night, no, I'm just gonna eat cold all the time. And I started like this with these big sacks on the legs, which was not the very good solution for the first part of the day, because when you lift your leg, I had this like, I mean, they each 6 liters of water on each leg, which was easy to carry the pack, I mean, lift the pack. Actually, I'm not lifting the pack, I put it on the ground, I strap it around me, I stand up, and then I take one of the bags, I clip it here, and I start walking. But I had this 6 liters, so 6 kilograms here. Very bad idea. So I changed and I clipped it on the backpack later during the day. I mean, you learn. No one had carried so much equipment or so much weight in the desert before. So the Simpson Desert, how is it? It's 1,100 dunes that are completely parallel, so they're lines. And so there's a dune, and in the middle there's a valley. And in the valley you have this kind of vegetation. So the crest is soft sand, and the bottom is kind of hard sand, easier to walk, but you have to zigzag a little bit. And in the Simpson Desert, there are 2 days where we reached above 40 degrees Celsius. So from 11 to about 2, 3 p.m., I had completely to stop. I could continue walking. I mean, I had kind of enough water, but the idea was to do the maximum distance. So like a car could go 200 kilometers per hour, I was, let's say, doing my 50 kilometers per hour. So using less water for the kilometer, that's what I did during the day. Obviously, I'm not alone in there, there's some animals. So to also avoid, usually I have a screen with a net on the fly net. So I have a hat and a net, mosquito net, and so the flies do not come. The thing is that it makes a screen. So when there's the wind coming, a little bit of wind and some breeze, I'm still hot. So on day 2, I removed that and I had the flies. And I don't know how I did it, I cannot explain it. But it took me 13 days, so for the next 12 days, I could do it. So from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I had flies between, I don't know, 5 to 20, 25, just buzzing and walking on my face all the time. I could not have one here better, right? I'll probably slap myself or try to slap it. But I could resist it, and I don't understand. Probably like cows now today in Belgium, they are completely used to the flies in them. And this is how I walked near the end. And then after a few days, I reached the center of the Simpson Desert for the second time, which actually I'm the only person in the world to reach it by foot, of course without a vehicle. And at a certain time, I had actually 2 days of rain, which is very strange in the most arid desert, but doesn't mean that it never rains. But I had the luck somehow to see the rain in the Simpson Desert. So I got a bit wet, found a bit of water, but you don't drink that. It's not deep enough, there's not enough water. It must be probably other animals have been drinking already. Problem with the wet and let's say the water is that my feet and my shoes got wet, so it was a bit harder to walk in the wet sand. And in the end, when I crossed the last dry lake, so you have salt lakes with salt and dry lakes, which are lakes without water, I crossed the last one and I reached the point I wanted to reach in 2008, which is called Pupil Corner, which is the point linking, which is a corner of 3 states in Australia. I'm just happy to get there. The third desert in Bolivia, I mean the crossing from north to south of the 2 largest salars. So Uyuni, probably some of you have been, is the largest, but there's the little brother, Coipasa. They come from actually the same lake 10,000 years ago when there was water, and I crossed it. So same thing again, I had a massive backpack, 41 kilograms, lot of water. Here the difficulty was the altitude. You are at an average of 3,800 meters, and it's not that easy, and especially the salt. So you breathe in very hard because of the altitude, the effort of 40 kilograms, and so you start to bleed a little bit from the nose, but that's kind of okay. I mean, I didn't bleed that much, so it was okay. But it's very hard here because the air you breathe makes the erosion painful. And then you walk on this surface, and you see this island in the middle, and that's like a goal in life, and it's only 40 kilometers away. But because it's kind of a long distance, it takes a full day to reach there. So it's like a goal that you do like for 13, 14 hours of walking. it's very hard because it feels like sometimes like, when am I going to get there to this island? Because this was my milestone. But eventually you get there. It feels like the closer you get, the further you are from it. But getting closer. If you want some shade, you have to be creative and try to find some. Obviously this is not at noon, because at noon there's no shade. And I discovered something that no one had told me. So under the crust, at some places on the Salar de Uyuni, there's water. Luckily, a few days I was walking during the night, so luckily I never fell into. And at a certain time, actually, I took my headlight and I was like, oh, there's a few holes. And during the day, I found that the water is obviously super salty. I think if you drink one glass of that thing, you probably end up in the hospital. It's completely saturated. But how was the depth? So this one was perhaps 80 centimeters, but I found where I could not feel the bottom and kind of turn around. And locals told me, yes, sometimes you have a vehicle driving and they drive fast and they go to the crust and they have an accident. So just be careful and ask your driver if you go there, it's not driving too fast or not off track on the normal track. And a few people asked me, but it's not the topic today, why are you doing all of this? So I found this sentence, which is, so I made a small mistake. So it's like a sitting intellectual in English goes less further than an idiot who's walking. And that's the idea. It's like in life, I think sometimes we are too sitting, let's say, on our arse and not moving forwards. I think we have really to take risks and try to do something else to learn and moving forwards. And even if you fail, obviously, as you know, if you fail, you learn something. So this is a mountain called Olympus Mons. And obviously, some people on the planet are preparing to go to Mars. And I think just trying and wanting to go to Mars is not very ambitious. We should already aim actually to climb Olympus Mons, which is the highest summit, the highest mountain of the solar system. And it's good, it's very close, it's on Mars, so perhaps in 20 years or less someone will climb it. So how big is that mountain? Everest is about 8,800, let's say 9 kilometers high. This one is around 25 kilometers high, so it's about 3 times Everest. The cliff you see in the shade is 10 kilometers, and then the plateau is like 2 times Belgium. So I believe, because it's so big, and you can see it from the mapping on Google Earth, you could actually cycle to the summit. So if one drops you with whatever spaceship there, just cycle to the crater. And I want to end with this last slide, which is a kind of ugly photo in the rain in the Simpson Desert. And it's like, I think we need to put ourselves with problems to learn something. Usually when you want to go to A, what happens, I mean, most of you are working on projects as project manager or as a participant in the project. And what happens is that you never really get 100% what you want. So obviously, and this is why you do margin with risks. And I think we have to plan to go to B or sometimes C. So if you aim for B and C that are way more ambitious, way harder, then you might reach very well your A point or your first idea. If you aim A, you're going to be next to it. So plan B, be more ambitious, take more risks, and taking risks, this is what's called adventure. Thank you.